Hello and welcome to Eden Live, where I am reading all of Eden by FREI live on Facebook and on YouTube with the recorded clips making their way onto Instagram, IGTV. We are in volume 10 of the Eden Miniature series, and this is called the Bournemouth and Boscombe Trilogy. And within that, we are in part 1 of 3, it being a trilogy, part 1 being called Pyromania. And within Pyromania, we are now about to do the third short segment. These aren't strictly chapters in that sense; they're more like short segments. They sort of look like. If you wonder how this works, just either listen, follow, or even go back to the previous ones. But I mean, you'll even if you happen upon this particular clip for the first time, you will still be able to follow the narrative. I have a feeling. It's called Pyromania. It's set in Bournemouth and Boscombe, which is why it's called the Bournemouth and Boscombe Trilogy. George knew nothing about incendiary devices. What he noticed, however, over the next 3 or 4 days, as he walked past these huts during the daytime, up and down the beach, in both directions from his flat near Boscombe Pier, was that not all, but many of them must have, tucked away inside them, a bottle of colour or similar gas used to fuel the mini stove. This would make his task, and that it had already turned into a task, of this he felt pretty certain. So much easier. It also prescribed his window of opportunity. The bottles, he reasoned, would be unlikely to be there or come into much use out of or towards the end of the season. And the season was not yet in swing. It was early June. The sea temperature at around 12 degrees Celsius was not yet attractive to casual bathers, even if some hardy swimmers could always be spotted of a late afternoon or early evening dipping themselves into the water. And so it would make sense, he believed, to strike at a significant enough moment soon. George's 1 or 2 friends at school were not the kind you could make accomplices in what he knew was not going to be an easy undertaking, and also not one designed to make him popular with his relatively new neighbours or the holiday makers who rented the huts for the summer or part thereof. He had no confidant either. The time frame he had just set himself was clearly too short to acquire one, and so he would have to rely on his own resources and relish the moment, when it came, most likely on his own. This did not make George sad. He was used to doing things on his own. Except there was a boy at school who liked and watched him more than he knew. Whether it was a teenage crush or simple idolization of an older, cooler, more worldly youth, or whether it was something else, neither George nor the boy, nor their parents, nor the earnest psychologist would ever be able to tell with any degree of certainty or authority, even though the earnest psychologist tried. The boy's name was Andy, and he was 2 years younger than George, just turned 13. He'd been aware of George for a good few weeks now, ever since George had arrived at school, as it happened, and he'd known instinctively that there was something special, something noteworthy, something edgy and therefore interesting about him. He half expected to find that George owned a snake, or collected spiders, or kept a diary in Esperanto, none of which George did. Still, Andy's young, distant assessment of George's character was not altogether wide of the mark. Little Andy, he was remarkably short and remarkably nimble on his feet and swift with his hands, surprised George just as he was looking up small detonators on the school computer. George used the school computer for doing his research because he reasoned that in a computer used by teenagers of all predilections, there were bound to appear search terms associated with blowing stuff up without attracting the immediate attention of MI5. What are you doing? Andy asked in his forthright, unawkward manner that stood in such contrast to his shy demeanour. George looked up, only a little up. Andy, standing virtually, came face to face with George sitting, and fixed his eyes straight into Andy's. I'm going to make some beach huts go bang. Really? Yes. How? I'm just finding out. Which ones? Ideally, all of them. Wow. Yep. All of them. Can you imagine? You'd see that for miles. Exactly. When? Summer solstice. Summer solstice. Summer solstice. Andy was already a conspirator. He didn't know it yet. The judge, on the counsel of another quite equally earnest psychologist with appalled leniency in her eyes, would later abnegate it, but Andy knew, and George knew, they were now in this together. That's soon, isn't it? It's in 3 weeks. Wow. Yep. Better get a move on then. George shut the computer and stood up, now in his moderate but lanky length, towering over little Andy. He ruffled his hair. Andy felt a shudder of delight charge through his young body. The fear of the forbidden paired with a ripple of inexplicable lust. And that is it for today. We shall continue with Pyromania in the Boscombe and Bournemouth trilogy. Bournemouth and Boscombe, I keep saying it wrong, in the Bournemouth and Boscombe trilogy. Soon, on Wednesday, in fact. I'll do this on a Monday and on a Wednesday at 6 p.m. London time, which currently is still BST, which is about 1 p.m. New York time. So join me again next time. Or if you find this in your own sweet time, then join me again in your own sweet time, if you feel like it, and not if you don't. Until then, take good care, love and let love, and see you very soon.